Learning Spanish later in life? Think it's too late? Think again. Today I'm joined by James Bretherton from James Spanish School, the Englishman teaching Spanish better than most natives. I've tried his fun and effective method myself, and thousands of adults and retirees in Spain are finally speaking Spanish with confidence thanks to his friendly, no-stress approach. We'll talk about his teaching style, online courses, Spanish culture, and even how humor plays a role in learning. Stick around, you might just rethink everything you thought about learning Spanish as an adult. Why would anyone want to be taught Spanish by an Englishman?
Well, I don't really consider myself an Englishman. What you've got to understand is the only thing I have about an Englishman is my surname and my timekeeping. I've lived in Spain now for 40 years, done all of my schooling here, and I only speak perfect English because I was given the gift by my parents of being spoken to in English and watching English television with them. But the gift that I have is that I saw my parents and all of their friends really struggle when they tried to speak Spanish because they were trying to translate the English into Spanish, which, as you know, doesn't work here. And they were saying things like, I'm hot, which you know that if you say I'm hot in Spanish, it means something totally different. So I've just used a gift that I've been given by my parents. But English, I go to England and I am a total foreigner there. And, I just speak very good English, which is, as I say, my gift, which I'm sharing with everybody.
Where did you go to school? In an English school in Spain?
No, when I came here, I was 4. And in Spain, they don't have to take you in the normal public state schools until you're 5. So living in Torrevieja, I had to do my first year. The only nursery, kindergarten that they had in Torrevieja was the local nunnery where the nuns looked after the children. And I did a year there, which was very intense as a 4-year-old, having a door opened by this huge nun. I've been afraid of penguins ever since. I was dipped in the deep end and I had to learn very quickly. I then went to school in Pilar de la Horadada, which is where my school is now. In fact, I look out of the window of my classroom now every day and see my son in the same playground that I was in as a child with some of the same teachers, which I think is unbelievable how they're still there. I seem to be the only person that is aging. And then I went to Murcia University to become a teacher. So I've done all of my education here in Spain. Very lucky that it was a totally Spanish school because, as I've said, the nuns didn't speak any English. And 40 years ago, you didn't have the massive amount of foreigners that we have here now in the schools where there's many more other English people you can speak to. So I was very lucky, and that made me be fluent in Spanish before I was fluent in English.
How long have you been teaching Spanish and where?
I've been teaching Spanish now because I started teaching English in a public school. I've been teaching Spanish now since I was 21, so being 44, that's 23 long years now. So I think I've got the practice and I've got the hang of it now after all of these years. It started out in small academies teaching Spanish to English people who wanted to learn for a bit of extra fun and hobby time. And then after that, it grew to my large classes of 30 people. And then, of course, I had my own school in Pilar, which the day before COVID broke out and we had to go into lockdown, I had 300 people a week coming to class on that Friday. So it's been many years of teaching now, but we've evolved onto the online, which is where it has really grown because there's no limit of only being able to teach the people that are local to you.
So you started teaching online. Most online language courses are done with Zoom, or are yours like that?
No, thank goodness we didn't go down the route of the Zoom lessons when COVID hit, because every course is different, and I'm not saying that Zoom lessons don't work at all. But the main problem is with Zoom lessons is that you're firstly limited to the time zone. So I couldn't have students like I have now from Australia and other places who wouldn't want to tune in for a lesson at 4 o'clock in the morning. Also, with the Zoom lessons, you have interruptions with some people's microphones, the doorbell rings, the dog barks. When you're doing pre-recorded lessons, you've got 100% attention and you can pause that lesson if you need to go to the door and come back and pick it up afterwards. Also, if you're to miss a lesson, it doesn't matter when you've got pre-recorded because you're watching it all the time, whenever you want. It's the access. If you want to do 10 lessons in a day, you can do 10 lessons in a day. And I think the main thing for me why the online pre-recorded lessons work much better for most of my students is the embarrassment. In a classroom, so many students, you can see them when it's coming to be their turn and they have to speak in front of the class. You can see them going red and starting to become very nervous. And that's the same in a Zoom class, because you're having to speak in front of 30 other people that are listening to every mistake you make. And a lot of people don't want to sound like idiots, don't want to make mistakes. So with pre-recorded, it's just you and me. You've got the Q&A button next to every lesson to ask me the questions. So it's like being in a classroom, but without the pressure of everybody else listening to you, which loads of people prefer. So many people are so shy when it comes to speaking in front of other students that it's definitely the best decision we ever made to make them pre-recorded.
So what is the difference between the free town hall or bar lessons and your James Spanish School lessons?
Well, again, there's no wrong way of teaching. I always have to say that. You just got to find what works for you. But many years ago, my local ayuntamiento approached me if I wanted to take on the town hall, the free town hall lessons that they do, which at the beginning I just showed some interest because I thought it might be another opportunity. But they said, if you take them on, you are not going to be allowed to speak a word of English. You have to do the lesson totalmente en español, which, you know, I can't teach somebody who knows nothing without using English. I have to explain to them in their own language how all these things work. And I've had loads of students that have come to me after going to the free town hall lessons, which again, I'm not saying that they do not work. I'm just saying they're not right for the majority of my students. And one of my students called Shelley, I remember her saying that every time the teacher would explain something, she would point at it on the board and go, "Entendéis?" which in Spanish means, "Do you understand?" But Shelley thought "entendéis" meant that in 10 days there was going to be a test on this. So she showed me her book and it said "in 10 days test," because she didn't understand what was being said. And also in a bar, that would be my worst nightmare, because I need to have people focusing on what I'm explaining. Distractions of fruit machines, somebody putting coins into the machines, the tobacco yelling, that would be my worst nightmare. And it is incredibly structured, my course, where you couldn't have people that are come one week, don't come the next week, go on holiday for 3 months. It's every lesson relies on what we have before. So the town hall lessons, do they work? Yes, they do to some extent, but there's a massive drop-off rate where people sign up, 30 people, and then after 2 weeks, because of what I've said, the explanations being in Spanish. And I do understand why they do that, because you've got people from Belgium, people from France, people from all other countries. And if you speak English, you have to speak all of those languages as well. But it doesn't work for the students that I have that are looking to be able to understand what's being said to them, explained in simple, plain English.
Do you start with teaching numbers, days, months, colors, and vegetables?
No, I don't do any of that in the course. I expect people to know their days of the week, numbers, colors on their own. You don't need to pay me to stand here and go uno, dos, tres. I expect people to be able to use a basic dictionary and learn vocabulary from shopping. I start the course by explaining how we structure things in Spanish, how we say things in Spanish, never using, though, the technical grammatical words, because that's one of the points which I have to keep explaining to people. I do not teach the names like preterite, imperfect, subjunctive. I don't teach the names of all of those things. We learn them, but without the technical names, because that's just, most of my students don't want that. They want to learn to be able to converse. So no, I have had people that said, "Oh, I've done some night school, I've done the days of the week, I've done the months. Where does that put me in your course?" And I go, lesson one always, because I don't teach any of that. I start with what's important. Very different, but very structured course.
Do you have to be in Spain to do the course?
No, of course not. As it's online, you can be anywhere in the world. The majority of my students are, of course, in Great Britain and in Spain, but we do have a lot from Northern Europe. We have Australia. We have lots and lots of people from America signing up now, which I'm sure you've got a lot of activity as well from Americans wanting to make the move over here. So not only do they want to learn the language, they want to learn the culture as well, which is really, really important. But no, anywhere in the world, at any time, as quickly or as slowly as you wish. The beautiful thing about streaming, and that is why online is definitely the future, because I'm not limited to just the 30 or 40 kilometers around my school for students.
Do you need a laptop or desktop computer to do your course?
No, most of my students do the lessons on their iPad or on their tablet or on their phone. Some people do like to also watch them on their desktop because they like to print off the notes and they have difficulty with their printer unless it's actually plugged into their computer. but you can do them on any device. But we just try and make the lessons as tech simple as possible, due to the fact that most of my students are retirees. They're not going to be really tech savvy, a lot of them. So we have to keep it very user friendly, very simple. And our tech guy, who you've met as well, he's 79, so he knows what sort of things you need to explain to that age group if they're trying to watch an online lesson, because they're not that tech savvy. So no, any device, you can be on multiple devices, so no need to have any special equipment or buy anything whatsoever.
That is so convenient. After you've done the lesson, can you do it again later?
Yes, again, the beauty of pre-recorded lessons. That with a Zoom lesson, as we were talking about earlier, the moment that Zoom call ends, you are relying totally on your memory. And that isn't a good thing to rely on. You're relying on your memory and your notes. Whereas with the videos, you have permanent access. You can go back over the lessons as often as you wish. When you finish the first part of the course, the core lessons, and you want to move on to the spoken Spanish, you still have access to all of those core lessons. And a lot of people come back, especially if they've been away for a couple of months, and they want to do a refresher, and they watch them again and again and again. There is no time limit, and you can revisit the lessons as often as you like, which we've been told that other courses cut you off after a time. We don't. It's yours permanently to continue watching as often as you wish.
Can you tell us about the kinds of students you have and your teaching approach with them?
The vast majority of my students are retirees that want to retire, finish work and come to Spain. And they just want to learn to be able to communicate in case there's a problem. I mean, they realize that they can go to their local supermarkets and not need much Spanish, but then when they need a tow truck or grua, or there's a big problem, they need to have a basic level of Spanish to be able to communicate. And it also makes life a lot easier when you have tradesmen come to the house to do any repair work. Most of my students retire, come to Spain, and the age group is exactly that. And they're not doing the course because they want any certificate. They're doing it because they want to integrate and feel part of the community that they live in. I had an online student that visited the school last week for a one-off lesson. He's done the course, or he's doing the course online, and he wanted to pop in and do a live lesson. And he said to me at the end, "Oh my goodness, everybody's my age," because he was maybe 63. He said, "I was expecting everybody in your class to be younger than you, James." I went, "No, most of my students are exactly your age, which is what I'm catering for, not the young people that want to come out here to work."
Teach the Spanish syllabus for DELE, the official Spanish exam, or Cervantes, etc.?
No, that's, again, the big difference is we do not cater for anybody who wants to sit those type of exams. And the reason being is because when you take any of those exams, they are going to need all of these technical names we were talking about, like the preterite, the imperfect, the present continuous, which I don't give you any of that. Also, I'm not as pedantic with all of the little flicks, accents on the words. It doesn't matter, because when you're speaking, nobody knows if you put your little flick on está when you're saying ¿Dónde está el coche? So it doesn't make any difference with all of those, whereas on an exam, of course, it does. So we do offer certificates for people who are trying to get their residencia as proof of integration. We do those with however many hours the students have done. But it's not for people who are wanting to sit one of these official exams, because I'm teaching people to be able to communicate, not to pass the great exam. And that's something which I really need people to understand, because I was telling my classroom a couple of months ago, I was at one of the local English supermarkets near to us, and my Spanish friend Danny, he asked one of the ladies in the shop in English, he said, "Excuse me, do you know where is the mustard?" And the lady looked at him and said, "Do you know where the mustard is?" And Danny sort of went, "Was that wrong, James?" And I went, "It's perfectly fine." So for me, if you're able to go into a shop and say, "Do you know where is the mustard?" in Spanish like that, you're there. That if you're not happy with "Do you know where is the mustard?" and you want to be absolutely perfect and say, "Do you know where the mustard is?" You need to do DELE, because DELE is going to make sure that everything is. But people, Spanish people, as you know, Bruno, Spanish people would much prefer somebody that can keep a conversation going, even if there are slight words that are in the wrong place, than somebody who is exactly perfectly correct, but takes 4 hours to say their sentence. And that's why so many people, when they want to be perfect, the Spaniard ends up saying, we can speak in Spanish, we can speak in English if you like, because they just get fed up of waiting, which is why my course is very, very different to all of the other ones.
That is so true. I can totally relate to that. I prefer, to keep the conversation going, and not interrupting, and just small mistakes that they don't really matter as long as the communication is flowing. Absolutely. I totally relate to that. You have a beginner's course and a spoken Spanish course. If you already know some Spanish, can you skip straight to spoken Spanish course?
No, you can't. Everybody has to start from the beginning. You're correct about the two parts. The core learning lessons, which is where I show everybody how everything is structured, and then we move on to the spoken Spanish. But you have to complete the core lessons first, because I'm showing you all of these shortcuts and all of these ways of speaking Spanish much faster. But people that already have a level, it says it on the website, that we offer a cast iron guarantee that for every lesson of the core package that somebody doesn't learn from, I will reimburse them with a spoken Spanish lesson at their level, free of charge, no questions asked. So basically, they have nothing to lose from starting at the beginning. And if you already have a level, you should be able to complete those first 50 core lessons very, very quickly, because you already know most of the things in theory that are being taught. So many people have come to the classes when I first started teaching saying, I did 2 years of night school in England, so I don't want to start from the beginning. I put them in at the end of the first year, and they knew the days of the week, the months of the year, and the colors. And then when I would say something in Spanish, they just look at you and go, I've got no idea. So no, everybody starts from the beginning. It's very structured. Go quickly, ask for credits. I give you credits for spoken Spanish. No questions asked. Everybody's happy and everybody learns.
How good do you have to be in English grammar to do your JSS course?
You don't have to know any English grammar at all. A lot of my students in the past have said, the great thing about James's course is he doesn't teach any grammar. Of course I teach grammar, but they don't realize they're doing it. When I say today we're going to learn how to make an order or command in Spanish by saying dame or págame, they don't realize that they're learning the imperative tense, because people don't know what these are. I mean, you're an intelligent guy, but I'm sure you don't know what an imperative, a preterites, all of these things are in Spanish, in English, even though you speak perfect English, because you didn't learn with learning these technical, grammatical, present continuous words. So you don't need to know any grammar, English grammar, to be able to do the course. You just need to be able to speak English, because my explanations are, of course, in English. And that's what a lot of people that say, I was never very good at school, so I don't know if I'll be able to learn. And I say, but you've learned to speak English, so you're half the way there. All I need to do now is tell you how to convert those English words into Spanish. But grammar, you don't need to know any at all. We have the Q&A section, so some people do say, is this the present continuous tense? And I reply and say, yes, it is. But in English, it's called ing, because ing is easier to remember than present continuous or gerund, which people have never heard of.
Your students say they learn a lot about Spanish culture in your course, but why does it matter? I mean, surely they are there to learn Spanish.
Yes, not just to learn Spanish. It's mainly for people who are planning on spending a lot of the time here in Spain or moving here permanently. And you need to understand simple things like when we queue in Spain, we don't queue in a line like English people do. We have a different system of, ¿quién es el último?, which in England you don't have, so they don't understand it. Also, silly little things that they've mislearned in the past, like señora, señorita. Calling somebody like my wife a señora will just destroy her. Señorita, a lot of English people think that señorita is when they're not married, señora is when they're married, which isn't the case in Spain now. So there's so many things as well about funerals, etc., that they need to learn to fit in more and to feel part of the community that they're spending a long time, holidaying, living, or retiring here permanently. It's about fitting in, and they want to feel part of their community, and Spaniards really like it when they see that you're adapting and understanding the differences. Also, when you learn why we do certain things, you realize that we're not rude when we disappear at 10:30 in the morning. When the builders arrive, leave at 10:30 and then come back smelling of brandy, and you think, who have I hired? But then you have it explained, and it's totally normal in Spain to finish at 10:30 for half an hour. So it is all a very important part of adapting and learning the language completely.
It's so true about queuing in Spain. Sometimes you arrive to a place, there's no line here, and you say like, "Why? Wow, this is fantastic!" But in fact, there is a line. There is one guy in the bar in front who is first in the line. There is another person buying something in the shop next door that
Correct.
is second in the line. So really, there is a line. It's just like it's not there to be seen, but it's
Exactly.
definitely there.
Yes, but then of course the English people think that we're rude because we've come in from outside from smoking, but we're still in our virtual line that we created half an hour ago. So, that when you have these things explained, people go, so they're not pushing in, they're not this, they're not, no, because we have our way of doing things, which is of course different to yours. And again, I have the gift of being able to see, having English parents the way they would expect it, and spending more than 10 hours a day with Spanish people when I was a child, then you realize this doesn't match. There's a difference here.
Your students talk all the time about your humor. How does that help them learn Spanish?
It's all about keeping somebody engaged. If you have a normal class, which is just explaining on the board, you can see people in the back just falling asleep. You need to keep them engaged and having a laugh. It's been proven that when you're laughing, when you're learning, you learn more. So I have a very sarcastic sense of humor, and I like to pick on everybody, including myself. So no nationality gets left unnamed in the course. But when people are laughing, and I like to wind up people as well, it just keeps them more engaged, and it makes for a better course rather than just boring them to sleep all of the time. So it's just all part of the whole package, the humor, which is about engagement and keeping people wanting to do another lesson rather than thinking, oh, I've got to do another lesson. They just enjoy it. It's like a mini series for them, basically. They binge watch and they have all of my dad jokes and sarcastic humor and all of the things which they enjoy and keeps them going.
How long will it take me to do the course?
Right. In my classroom, it would take you 3 years, because in my classroom, I only offer one lesson of 1 hour per week. So you get 50 lessons a year. So it would take you 3 years to complete the course, which is the slowest possible way of doing it. If you do it online and you do an hour a week and then another hour of study time in between, you can complete the online course in 2 years, which is the normal completion time if you're doing it laid back. But if you're willing to do, when somebody asks me, James, what is the right amount of time I should be putting in? You can put in 3 hours a week to the course. You can complete the course in a year. And of course, if you already have a level of Spanish and you're going to zoom through those first 50 lessons and complete them much quicker, well, then you can complete the course in 6 months. We have advanced students that do it in 6 months easily. But I would say if you aim for a year at 3 hours a week, that's a very, very good aim. That's why so many people sign up at the start of the year, because they think this time next year, I'll be able to communicate and understand what's going on.
What kind of level can I expect to reach?
A finished student, for me, somebody who completes at my school the 3 years, does everything as I would expect, will finish with the conversational skills of a 7 to 8 year old, which a lot of people go, 7 to 8 year old, that's terrible. No, my son, who is 8 at this moment in time, you can have a very good conversation with my son about cars, about his holidays, about things he wants to do, things he's seen. You can have a conversation, but of course, if my son was to pick up a grown-up newspaper, not the Sun, and start reading it, and it says the ethnic cleansing in southern Beirut has been hampered by the deneutralization of troops, my son would not understand anything he's just read, and that would be the same as one of my students. If my students pick up El País and they're trying to read anything in there that's technical, and that's due to lack of vocabulary. Vocabulary is something that you continually learn always. I'm still learning words in English as you're still learning words in English. That goes on forever. But a finished product for me has the conversational skills of a 7 to 8 year old, which you can have a very good conversation, but you're always keeping it simple. You're simplifying with the vocabulary that you know and using all of the shortcuts.
Yes, and I think 50% of words in English would match more or less words in Spanish, because we have the same route, no? A lot of English comes from Old French, which is a Latin language, same as Spanish. So it's not that difficult to gain vocabulary pretty quick, I think, for an English person, and vice versa.
Yes, the problem is with the English language is that it's been bastardized so many times over the years with all of the other countries that England has invaded, and they've adapted a lot of other languages to it, whereas Spanish has stayed quite pure. And that's why there's a lot of Spanish words that when I was little, my father thought I might have some superpower, because I know a lot of old English words. Like, for example, the word for safe in Spanish, we call caja fuerte, which is strongbox, which is what it used to be called in England, many years ago. We don't call it a strongbox anymore. The same as a lot of our Spanish verbs, like the verb to regret, which we use arrepentir or lamentar. Now in English, arrepentir is to repent, lamentar is to lament. So when I would say to my father when I was 8, he's going to repent that, my father would go, why are you saying repent or lament? That's biblical. You don't use words like that. And it's just because our Spanish language has stayed very pure, very simple. English language, you have 5 times as many words in English as we do in Spanish. 5 times. So that's why we have to make one word like dolor means so many other things. So how do you say pain? Dolor. How do you say ache? Dolor. How do you say twinge? Dolor. Headache, dolor de cabeza. Pain in my back, dolor de espalda. And they go, so dolor is everything. Yeah, because we don't have as many words as the English language. That's why it's much easier to learn Spanish. Anybody with half a brain can learn Spanish, which that's most of my students.
How can you do spoken Spanish lessons online?
There's 3 very big mistakes that people make when they are thinking about doing the spoken lessons. They think that if they come to the classroom, it's going to be me and them face to face for the whole hour. In my classroom, I have 30 people. So if you are doing a face-to-face lesson with me in my classroom now, you're going to be getting 1 go out of every 30. So if in an hour I do 100 sentences, which is a lot, you're going to get 3 goes. But the main problem that I have to address with people is everybody, when they sign up, they think the problem is going to be speaking Spanish. Speaking is very, very easy. Everybody can speak Spanish by the end of the first 50 lessons. The problem is understanding what comes back. That's where everybody gets destroyed. And the big problem is when people finish the first 50 lessons, they have quite a decent level of Spanish, being able to create sentences. So they go into the chemist and they say, yo quiero 2 paquetes de paracetamol, por favor. And they say it like that. So the lady in the chemist thinks you're absolutely fluent and looks at you and says, tenemos una oferta hoy con ibuprofeno. ¿Quieres un paquete de ibuprofeno también? And you go, quiero 2 paquetes de aspirina, por favor, because you have no idea what they've just said. So the spoken Spanish lessons are aimed at tuning your ear and understanding. Yes, there are lessons where I make you create the sentences and say them, but the main part is listening. You've got to hear Spanish, and that's the very hard part. The Spaniards, you say we speak very, very quickly. We join up all of our words when we speak, so you have to be really, really good at listening. And that only comes with practice, and that practice you're only going to get by doing spoken Spanish lessons all the time, not once a week. That's the biggest difference. And the other 3rd misconception is people think, oh, the really important thing is pronunciation. I need to know how to pronounce correctly, which you do not. That's, again, going back to what we were saying earlier. Spaniards would much prefer somebody who can speak, even if your accent is a little bit rough. I mean, you speak perfect English, but we can tell you have an accent in the background. When you hear Antonio Banderas and he says, we are very happy to be here and we hope to not have any problems when we are in Spain, but he speaks perfect English. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not trying to make you sound Spanish. I'm trying to make you be able to communicate correctly. And the only way you're going to do that is by doing lots of online listening practice. But we have lots of different ones. We have interactive lessons. We have ones where you have to create the sentence. We have quick about keeping people engaged and entertained along with the humor. But the 3 big misconceptions are exactly that if I come to the classroom, it's going to be more intense. It's not. The online videos are far more intense because every one of the sentences is for you. Whereas in the classroom, I know people do it. They have their turn, and while everybody else is talking, they're thinking, oh, what was I going to get shopping this evening? Or I have to hang the washing out. So they're not listening. Whereas when you're doing a lesson where it's just you and me constantly, that is definitely the way forward. And again, why after COVID, a lot of my students decided not to come back to the class them to Caroline. You know, the 300 students a week on the last Friday before COVID, that's never been matched again since, because everybody wants online. They can do it whenever they like. They haven't got to drive, they haven't got the petrol, they haven't got the half an hour to school, half an hour home. So doing them online, learning to listen and not thinking that speaking is going to be the difficult part. It's going to be understanding, which, you know, when you started learning English, you know, you could say things, but then they come back and you'd be like, I have no idea what these people are saying. So definitely online spoken lessons are the way forward.